The galaxy had known peace for 3,000 years, but it was not a peace born from friendship or understanding or any noble thing that species might celebrate in their histories. It was a peace born from Terra Commander Zorath Valketh stood on the observation deck of the warship called Eternal Consequence and watched the planet below with all four of his eyes. His throat plates clicked together in a sound that his species made when they felt something between sadness and duty. The planet was called Nexer 7, and it had committed the ultimate crime against the Galactic Concord and had refused to pay tribute. "Commander," said his second officer, a tall creature with scales that shimmered like oil on dark water. "The weapon is ready for deployment." Zorath did not respond immediately. He had served the Concord for 40 cycles, and he had seen this weapon used 3 times before. Each time, it haunted his sleep for years afterward. "Tell me again why they refused," he said quietly. Their leader claimed that the tribute was too high and that his people were starving under the demands of the Concord. And the Council's response? The Council said that starvation is a choice, but disobedience is a disease that must be burned away before it spreads. Zorath made a sound that his translator would have rendered as a sigh if any other species had been listening. "Then we have no choice," he said. "Release the hydro charge." The weapon bay doors opened, and something descended toward the planet below it. It was a sphere about the size of a small shuttle, and it shimmered with an inner light that seemed almost beautiful if you did not know what it contained inside. That sphere was the most dangerous substance in the known universe. The Concord called it by its scientific name in formal documents. Dihydrogen monoxide. Common species had simpler names for it. They called it the world ender. They called it the silent death. They called it the liquid horror. The sphere fell through the atmosphere of Nexer 7, and when it struck the ground, it did not explode in fire or thunder. Instead, it simply opened, and from within it poured water, not a small amount of water, but an ocean compressed into quantum storage. Released all at once in a tide that swept across the continent, the people of Nexer 7 had evolved on a world of sulfur and ammonia. Their skin was made to process gases that would kill most other creatures. Their blood was thick with compounds that let them survive in temperatures that would freeze methane solid. They had never seen water before. They had only heard of it in whispered warnings passed down through generations. Now they learned why their ancestors had been so afraid the water touched their skin and immediately began to react with their biology. The hydrogen and oxygen molecules were so aggressive, so reactive, that they tore through cell walls like acid. Creatures who had lived for 100 cycles dissolved in moments. Buildings made of metal compounds that had stood for 1,000 years began to rust and corrode. The atmosphere itself changed as the water evaporated and rose, creating clouds that had never existed on this world before. Within 6 hours, the planet was dead. Not a single living thing remained on the surface. The water had done what fire could not, what radiation could not, what even the most terrible conventional weapons could not. It had erased a civilization completely. Commander Zorath watched it all from orbit, and his throat plates clicked so hard that his second officer looked at him with concern. "Are you unwell, Commander?" "I am remembering," Zorath said, "why we do not speak of this weapon in casual conversation. The hydro weapons are necessary," his second officer said with the confidence of someone who had never seen them used before today. "Without them, the Concord would have no way to maintain order among so many species. That is what the Council says." Zorath agreed. And perhaps they are right. He did not sound like he believed it. The truth was that the Galactic Concord ruled through fear and always had 12 species had joined together thousands of years ago. When they discovered that they shared one common trait, they had all evolved on worlds where water did not exist. Ammonia worlds and sulfur worlds and methane worlds and worlds of exotic gases that humans would not even have names for when they first encountered water on a rogue comet that drifted into their territory. They had studied it with scientific curiosity. That curiosity turned to horror when they realized what the substance could do. It dissolved almost everything. It carried heat in ways that disrupted any metabolic process not specifically designed for it. It was so chemically aggressive that it could break down the strongest materials given enough time, and worst of all, it was stable. It did not decay or break apart on its own once water was introduced to an environment. It stayed there forever, poisoning everything it touched for generation after generation. The Concord had weaponized this discovery immediately. They found worlds where water existed naturally, and they harvested it with robots and drones, never allowing any living being to get close. They compressed it into quantum storage spheres that could hold oceans and spaces smaller than a room, and they used it to conquer species that might have resisted conventional warfare surrendered the moment the Concord threatened to deploy a hydro weapon. What was the point of fighting if your entire world could be rendered uninhabitable with a single strike? No amount of military strength could protect against water. No shield technology could filter out something that existed as liquid and gas and solid all at once. No bunker could keep you safe when the very air was turning into poison. So species surrendered and paid tribute and obeyed the Concord in all things, and the galaxy knew Pizareth watched the clouds forming over the dead world of Nexer 7 and wondered if this was truly peace or simply a longer, slower form of dying. Set course for the Concord homeworld, he ordered at last. We will report our success to the Council. Yes, Commander. The ship turned away from the planet and engaged its faster-than-light drives behind them. The world that had once held 12 billion people continued to drown in the most terrible weapon the galaxy had ever known, and across 1,000 star systems. Other species watched the news reports and remembered why they never questioned the Concord. They remembered why they paid their tributes on time. They remembered why they kept their heads down and their complaints silent, because the alternative was water, and nothing survived water, nothing at all, so they believed until 6 months later, when a strange ship came tumbling out of a dimensional rift, and everything the galaxy thought it knew was proven wrong. Ambassador Desix Morn had been chosen for this mission because she was considered expendable. She knew this, and she accepted it because that was simply how things worked in the Galactic Concord. Her species, the Velith, were small and weak, and had only joined the Concord because the alternative was extinction. They processed sulfur dioxide through their skin, and their homeworld was a place of yellow clouds and burning winds that most other species found unpleasant to even think about. When the strange ship appeared in Concord space, broadcasting signals on frequencies that no one recognized, the Council needed someone to investigate. They needed someone who could be sacrificed if the aliens proved hostile. Desix was perfect for the job. She piloted her small shuttle toward the alien vessel with her 4 hands trembling on the controls. Ship was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was blocky and inelegant, covered in markings that her translator could not read, and it tumbled slowly through space as if it had lost control of its navigation systems. Alien vessel. She transmitted on every frequency her shuttle could produce. This is Ambassador Desix Morn of the Galactic Concord. Please respond if you are able. For several long moments there was only silence. Then a voice came through her speakers, speaking in sounds that her translator struggled to process. Hello, the voice said once the translation caught up. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth vessel Magellan's Hope. We seem to be a bit lost. Can you tell us where we are? Desix felt some of her fear ease. The voice sounded confused rather than aggressive. Perhaps these aliens were simply travelers who had wandered into the wrong part of space. You are in territory controlled by the Galactic Concord. She replied, I am transmitting coordinates now. May I approach your vessel for a formal first contact meeting? Sure, the alien captain said. Come on aboard. We have a lot of questions. Desix docked her shuttle with the alien ship and waited. For the airlock to cycle, she had brought a portable atmosphere generator with her because she assumed that the alien environment would be hostile to her biology. She was correct about that. Though not in the way she expected, the airlock opened and Vesix stepped into the alien vessel. For a moment, she simply stood there, trying to understand what she was seeing. The interior of the ship was bright and clean and filled with creatures that stood on two legs and had soft skin in various shades of brown and pink and tan. They had hair on their heads in different colors, and they wore simple clothing that covered most of their bodies. But none of that was what made Vesix freeze. In place, what made her freeze was the open container of liquid sitting on a table nearby. It was clear and colorless, and it rippled slightly with the vibration of the ship's engines. Vesix knew immediately what it was. She had studied the weapon in training. She had seen recordings of its deployment. She would recognize dihydrogen monoxide anywhere. "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely functional. "Why do you have that on your ship?" One of the aliens looked at the container and then back at her. "The water?" he asked. "You want some?" Vesix made a sound that her species only made in moments of absolute primal terror. She stumbled backward toward the airlock, but her legs were not working properly. The aliens looked at each other with expressions she could not read. "Hey," one of them said. "Are you okay? You have a weapon of mass destruction sitting on your table." Vesix managed to say, "How can you be so calm? A weapon?" The alien said, "It's just water. We drink it." Vesix felt her mind go blank. She was certain she had mistranslated something. There was no way these creatures had just said what she thought they said. "You drink it," she repeated slowly. "Yeah," the alien said. And then, to prove his point, he picked up the container and lifted it to his mouth and poured the liquid. Inside of Vesix watched the most dangerous substance in the universe disappear into an alien's body, and her four hands began to shake so badly she could not control them. The alien swallowed and smiled at her. "See," he said, "perfectly safe. We drink this stuff all the time. All the time." Vesix heard herself say, "Sure, humans need about 2 liters a day to stay healthy." Vesix did not know what a liter was, but she understood the concept of daily consumption. These creatures consumed the world ender every single day. They needed it to survive. She activated her communication device with fingers that would not stop trembling. Control. She transmitted back to the Concord relay station. "I have made contact with the alien species." "Report," came the reply. "They are." Vesix paused, trying to find words that would make sense. "They are not hostile in the traditional sense." "Explain." "They have dihydrogen monoxide on their vessel." There was a long silence. "The weapon?" Control asked. "Yes, they have it stored openly throughout their ship. They have reservoirs of it. They have containers of it on their tables." And Control. Vesix took a breath that her species did not technically need, but which helped her steady her nerves. "They consume it." "Clarify your statement, Ambassador." "They drink it. They pour it into their bodies. They say they need it to survive." Control. "I just watched one of them swallow enough dihydrogen monoxide to kill a dozen Velith," and he smiled at me afterward. The silence that followed was so long that Vesix thought the connection had been lost. "Ambassador," Control said at last, "please confirm that you are not under duress and that you are providing an accurate report." "I confirm," Vesix said. "I am not under duress. I am standing in a ship filled with creatures who drink the world ender like it is nothing. Return to the relay station immediately. Bring one of the aliens if possible. The Council will want to verify this in person." Vesix looked at the humans, who were watching her with curious expressions. One who had drunk the water was now refilling his container from a device on the wall that apparently produced an endless supply of the substance. "Captain Vasquez," Vesix said carefully, "would you and some of your crew be willing to accompany me to meet the leaders of the Galactic Concord?" The captain, a female with dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold no fear at all, nodded. "We'd love to," she said. "Maybe you can help us figure out how to get back home." "I will do what I can." Desix said she meant it too, because if these creatures were what she thought they were, if they truly could consume dihydrogen monoxide without harm, then the entire balance of power in the galaxy was about to change. The Concord had ruled through fear of a weapon that could destroy worlds. But what happened when someone appeared who could not be destroyed by that weapon? What happened when the ammunition became? Futuristic did not know the answer, but she suspected that the Council would be very interested in finding out. The Council chamber of the Galactic Concord was a vast space designed to intimidate. 12 thrones sat in a semicircle, each one holding a representative of the founding species that had built the Concord 3,000 years ago. Above them floated holographic displays showing the sigils of conquered worlds. A reminder to all who entered that resistance was not just futile but forgotten. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the center of the chamber with 5 of her crew and tried very hard not to laugh. She had been a captain in the Earth Space Force for 15 years. She had faced pirates and navigated asteroid fields and survived a reactor breach that had killed half her original crew. She thought she had seen everything the universe could throw at her. She had been wrong. The aliens before her were terrified not of her weapons, which had been confiscated at the door, not of her crew, who were unarmed and outnumbered by approximately 1,000 to 1. They were terrified because their science officer had brought a water bottle. "Please," one of the council members said. Its voice translated through speakers that made it sound mechanical and cold. "Please ask your subordinate to contain that substance." Elena looked at Lieutenant Kim, who was holding a standard-issue hydration container with a confused expression. "The water bottle?" Elena asked. "The weapon," the council member corrected. "We allowed it to remain because Ambassador Desix insisted we see proof of your claims. But it is making several council members uncomfortable." Elena looked around the chamber and noticed that about half of the 12 rulers were pressed as far back in their thrones as possible. One of them appeared to be trembling. "I apologize," Elena said, still not entirely sure this was real. "But I need to understand what is happening here." "You do not know?" another council member asked, this one speaking with more authority than the others. "You truly do not know what you carry." "It is water," Elena said slowly. "It is hydrogen and oxygen, 2 of the most common elements in the universe. Every planet in our home system has it in some form. Then your home system is a place of death," the authoritative council member declared. "Dihydrogen monoxide is the most dangerous substance known to civilized species. It destroys organic matter. It corrupts ecosystems. It cannot be stopped once it is released." Elena was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to her crew. "Is this real?" she asked. "Am I having some kind of stress dream? If you are, then we all are captain." Lieutenant Kim replied. "They really are scared of water." Elena turned back to the council. "I need you to understand something," she said. "Humans are made of water. About 70% of our bodies are dihydrogen monoxide. We cannot survive without it." The council chamber fell absolutely silent. Kind of silence that comes before storms or earthquakes, or the complete collapse of everything you thought you knew about the universe. "That is impossible," someone said. "I assure you it is not," Elena replied. "We drink water every day. We bathe in it. We swim in it for recreation. Our planet is covered in it. We have oceans that stretch from horizon to horizon." "Oceans," the authoritative council member repeated. "You have oceans of the weapon. We have oceans of water, yes. And rivers and lakes and rain that falls from the sky. Water is everywhere on Earth. It is the most common thing we know." One of the council members made a sound that the translator could not process. Another one simply slumped in their throne as if all the strength had left their body. "You are immune," someone whispered. "You are immune to the world ender." "We are not immune," Elena corrected. "We are dependent on it. We need it to live. It flows through our blood and fills our cells. Without water, we die within days." "Then you are." The authoritative council member paused, searching for words. "You are the weapon made flesh." Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. Not water, though there was plenty of that, but understanding these aliens had built their entire civilization on fear of a substance that humans considered essential for life. They had conquered worlds and destroyed species using nothing more than what Elena drank every morning with her coffee, and now they were looking at her and their crew like they were monsters made manifest, I think. Elena said carefully, "We need to have a very long conversation about how we can all move forward peacefully." "Peacefully?" One of the council members laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You carry death in your bodies, and you speak of peace." "We do not want war," Elena said. "We just want to find our way home. We came here by accident through a dimensional rift, and we have no hostile intentions." "Your intentions do not matter," the authoritative council member said. "Your existence changes everything." "What do you mean?" "For 3,000 years, the Concord has maintained order through the hydro weapons. We have kept peace because every species knows that defiance means death by water. But now," the council member gestured toward Elena and her crew, "now there are creatures who drink our weapons like they are refreshments." Elena began to understand the full scope of what she had stumbled into. "You rule through fear," she said. "And we are something you cannot make others fear because we prove the weapon is not absolute. You prove that the weapon is nothing." The council member corrected. "You prove that somewhere in the universe there are beings who would dance in the rain that kills us." "We do dance in the rain," Lieutenant Kim said helpfully. "We have whole festivals about it." Several council members made sounds of distress. Elena shot Kim a look that clearly communicated that he should stop talking. "What happens now?" she asked the council. Was silent for a long moment. Then the authoritative member spoke. "Again, we do not know," it admitted. "For the first time in 3,000 years, the Concord does not know what to do." "Perhaps," Elena said, "you could start by telling us the truth, all of it, and then we can figure out together how to proceed." "The truth, yes. How did you get water weapons? How many worlds have you destroyed with them? Why did you build an empire on terror instead of cooperation? You ask us to confess our sins to creatures who embody our nightmares." "I ask you to be honest," Elena said, "because I suspect that if we are going to share this galaxy, honesty is going to be the only thing that keeps us from destroying each other." The council members looked at one another. Then slowly, reluctantly, they began to speak, and Elena Vasquez listened to 3,000 years of horror visited upon the galaxy by beings who had found a weapon and decided to use it rather than lock it away. She listened, and she understood, and she began to plan. The Magellan's Hope had found its way home 3 months before the Concord fleet arrived. The dimensional rift that had swallowed it had been unstable, but not unrepeatable, and human scientists working around the clock had managed to open a pathway. Back to Earth, Captain Elena Vasquez had returned as a hero, though she felt more like a messenger, carrying the worst news imaginable. "There is an empire out there," she told the United Nations Assembly, her voice carrying to billions watching across the planet. "And they have been murdering entire worlds with water." She showed them the recordings. She showed them Nexer 7 and a dozen other worlds that had been drowned. She showed them the pilgrim testimonies and the Titan Wizard that them, the Mayre Pamen, Paven in the pilgrim testimonies, and council demands and the fleet that was already assembling to come for Earth. "They are afraid of us," she concluded, "because we drink what they use to kill." They think it makes us monsters. Are we? Someone in the assembly asked. No. Elena said firmly, we are human. We have done terrible things in our history, but we have also learned from them. We know what it means to be the ones holding the weapon, and we know what it costs to use it. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that we have a choice. We can hide and hope they do not find us, or we can stand up and show the galaxy that fear does not have to rule forever. The debate that followed lasted 6 days. In the end, humanity voted to stand the Earth defense. Force had never anticipated an alien invasion, but they adapted quickly. Human engineers looked at the intelligence gathered from Concord space and realized something that made them laugh out loud. All Concord weapons were designed to deliver water. Their missiles carried hydrocharges. Their bombs were pressurized containers of dihydrogen monoxide. Their entire military philosophy was built around the deployment of a substance that humans use to water their gardens. We can beat them with swimming pools. One admiral said in disbelief. Their most devastating weapon would not even ruin a picnic on Earth. But the humans did not just prepare to defend. They prepared to intimidate. When the Concord fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, they found Earth waiting for them. Orbital platforms surrounded the blue-green planet like a shell of metal and technology, and every single platform was armed with water. This is Fleet Admiral Chun of the United Earth Defense Force. The transmission went out on all frequencies. You are entering sovereign human space. Commander Zorth Valkith stood on the bridge of the Eternal Consequence and stared at the sensor readings with all 4 of his eyes wide open. The platforms were not armed with lasers or missiles or any weapon his computers recognized. They were armed with massive tanks of liquid dihydrogen monoxide. Some of them had heating systems that could turn the water into superheated steam. Others had cooling systems that could freeze it into projectiles. Others still had pressurization systems that could fire concentrated streams of water with enough force to cut through starship armor. The humans had taken the Concord's ultimate weapon and turned it into a defensive perimeter. They are insane. Zorth whispered, Commander. His second officer said with barely controlled panic in his voice. They're soldiers. Look at their soldiers. Zorth activated the visual sensors and zoomed in on the nearest platform. Human soldiers stood at their posts. Wearing combat armor on their backs, they carried containers of water, personal hydration systems. The translator called them. The humans carried water into battle the same way his species might carry ammunition. Commander, his communications officer called out. We are receiving a transmission from the human admiral. Play it, Admiral Chun's voice filled the bridge. Each of our orbital platforms contains approximately 50,000 liters of liquid dihydrogen monoxide. Some of it is heated to various temperatures and pressures. Some of it is frozen into high-velocity projectiles, and some of it, there was a pause that the translator interpreted as amusement, is sparkling. Zorth did not understand what sparkling meant, but he understood the tone. Humans were not afraid. They were not even particularly concerned. They were making jokes. Furthermore, Admiral Chun continued, our planet below is covered in approximately 1.3 billion cubic kilometers of liquid water. Our atmosphere contains water vapor. Our clouds are made of water. We have storms that drop water from the sky onto our heads, and we call these storms refreshing. Do you understand what I am telling you, Commander? Zorth understood. He understood that every weapon in his fleet was useless. He understood that the Concord had sent 3,000 ships to threaten a species that could not be threatened by anything. He understood that he was looking at the end of an empire. Your fleet has 2 choices. Admiral Chun said, you can retreat peacefully and return to Concord space to tell your masters that Earth is not a target they can threaten. Or you can try to attack us and learn firsthand what happens when you fire water at beings who consider it essential to life. What would happen? Zorth's second officer asked quietly. They would probably drink it. Zorth replied. He looked at his fleet. 3,000 ships that had conquered worlds and destroyed civilizations and maintained control of the galaxy for 3,000 years. Then, he looked at the blue planet with its vast oceans and swirling clouds. "All ships," he ordered, "reverse course. We are returning to Concord space." "Commander," his second officer protested, "the Council will. The Council can do whatever they wish to me." Zorath interrupted, "But I will not order good soldiers to die in a battle. That cannot be won." The fleet turned away from Earth and across the galaxy. Everyone watched. They watched the mighty Concord retreat from a single planet. They watched the ultimate weapon become meaningless. They watched fear begin to die. Within a year, the Concord had collapsed not through warfare, but through the simple erosion of the terror that had held it together. Species that had cowered for millennia stood up and declared independence. They did so because they knew that if they used Concord tried to use the hydro weapons, there was now a species who would respond with those same weapons turned back on the attackers. Humans became peacekeepers almost by accident. Their diplomats carried water bottles to negotiations, and no one ever forgot what those bottles represented there. Ships ran on hydrogen fuel cells that made pirates surrender without a fight. There, children played with squirt guns that other species classified as weapons of mass destruction. And when asked how they had defeated an empire built on terror, humans usually shrugged and said the same thing: "We just stayed hydrated." Ambassador Thessixmorn lived long enough to see the new galaxy take shape. She visited Earth once, wearing a protective suit that kept the water vapor from touching her skin. She stood on a beach and watched the ocean stretch to the horizon. All that death made beautiful by creatures who had never learned to fear it. "Thank you," she told Captain Vasquez, who had come to meet her. "Thank you for showing us that fear is a choice. We did not do anything special." Elena replied, "We just were what we are." "Yes," Thessix agreed, and that was enough. She watched the waves roll in and thought about all the worlds that had drowned in that same substance. She thought about 3,000 years of terror. She thought about the future, and for the first time in her life, she was not afraid. The galaxy had feared water for 3 millennia, but somewhere beyond the dimensional barriers, a species had learned to love it instead, and that had made all the difference. News traveled faster than light in the galaxy, and this news traveled faster than anything had ever moved before it. Concord tried to contain it, but that was like trying to contain water itself. Fitting given the circumstances within 3 standard weeks, every civilized species in the galaxy knew about the humans. They knew that somewhere beyond the dimensional barriers there were creatures who drank the world ender. They knew that the ultimate weapon of the Concord was nothing more than a beverage to these strange soft-skinned beings, and they knew that everything was about to change. The first pilgrims arrived at the human vessel within days of the council meeting. They came in small ships and large, alone and in groups, representing species that had been conquered and broken and humiliated by the Concord for thousands of years. They came to see the miracle with their own eyes. Captain Elena Vasquez found herself hosting delegations of aliens who wept when they watched a human take a sip of water. "You do not understand," one pilgrim told her through the translator. "My grandmother's world was destroyed by the hydro weapons. My entire species lives in fear that one day we will displease the Concord and they will do the same to us." "But you," the alien reached out a tentacle toward Elena's water bottle with something like reverence. "You make the weapon meaningless. It was never a weapon to us," Elena said gently. "It was just water. That is what makes it so powerful," the alien replied. "You did not overcome your fear of the substance. You never had fear to begin with. You cannot be terrorized by something you love." More pilgrims came. They brought stories with them. Thousands upon thousands of stories about worlds that had been drowned. about species that had surrendered everything to avoid the water, about children taught from birth that dihydrogen monoxide was death itself given liquid form. Elena listened to all of them, her crew listened too, and slowly the humans began to understand what they had accidentally discovered. They killed billions of people with water. Lieutenant Kim said one night in the ship's mess hall, his voice hollow with something between grief and rage. They committed genocide with something we used to wash our hands. They were afraid, Elena said, though she did not say it to excuse anything. They found something they could not understand, and instead of trying to understand it, they made it a weapon. That does not make it okay. No, Elena agreed. It does not. The Concord Council sent demands for the humans to surrender themselves for study. They wanted to understand how the human body processed water. They wanted to know if the immunity could be replicated or if humans could somehow be used against. Their will is living weapons. Elena refused. We are not your subjects, she transmitted to the council. We are not your prisoners. We are travelers who stumbled into your territory by accident, and we will leave as soon as we can figure out how. You will not be permitted to leave, the council replied. You represent a threat to galactic stability. We represent a threat to your power, Elena corrected. That is not the same thing. The council did not respond to that. Meanwhile, the pilgrimages continued. Species who had been enemies for centuries began meeting aboard the human vessel because it was the only neutral ground in the galaxy. The humans provided water for themselves and separate refreshments for their guests, and somehow those simple acts of hospitality became revolutionary. You share with us, a Velith trader observed. You give us food and shelter and ask nothing in return. That is what hospitality means, Elena said. The Concord does not understand hospitality, the trader replied. The Concord only understands tribute and punishment. Perhaps that needs to change. The trader looked at her with eyes that had seen too much suffering to hold much hope. Change requires power, she said. And the Concord has all the power. The Concord has power because everyone is afraid of water, Elena said. But what happens when that fear goes away? It cannot go away. We are biologically incapable of surviving contact with dihydrogen monoxide. True, Elena admitted. But you are not biologically incapable of standing behind someone who can. The trader was silent for a long moment. You would protect us, she asked. I do not know yet, Elena said honestly. We are far from home and we do not know if we can ever get back. I cannot make promises on behalf of all humanity when I do not even know if humanity knows we are here. But you would try. Elena thought about the story she had heard. She thought about billions of lives lost to a substance she drank. Every day, without thinking, she thought about children raised in terror of rain that would never fall on their methane and ammonia. Worlds. Yes, she said at last. We would try. Word of that conversation spread too, and suddenly the pilgrimages became something more. They became delegations. They became representatives of species who wanted to know what an alliance with humans might look like. The Concord watched all of this with growing alarm. For 3,000 years, they had maintained control by being the only ones willing to use the ultimate weapon, but the weapon was useless against humans, and humans were starting to make friends. Commander Zorath Valkas received orders to assemble a fleet. He knew what those orders meant. The Concord was going to try to destroy the humans before they could organize the conquered species into something that might resist. He thought about the planet Nexer 7 and the way the clouds had formed over the dead world. He thought about 3,000 years of terror. He thought about a species that drank death and smiled, and for the first time in his long career, he wondered if he was serving the wrong side. The fleet assembled anyway, 3,000 ships. The largest military force the Concord had ever gathered. They set course for the Sol system, which the humans had identified as their homeworld. They did not know what they would find there, but they knew they had to try something before the galaxy slipped through their fingers forever.